Lilo and Stitch is arguably one of Disney's most popular animated films, despite premiering well after their so-called Renaissance age, with beloved classics such as The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and the behemoth of money-making that is The Lion King. In fact, I'd say that the critical and commercial success of Stitch is the only reason we got a few more 2D animated films before they swiftly disappeared indefinitely. I mean, you see Stitch products everywhere, yet it's easy to see why Stitch stood out among its animated peers. Some might argue that Lilo and Stitch is superior to Disney's early 2000s flops in regards to writing, emotional resonance, and characterization. But I think there's a much simpler explanation. Not since Oliver and Company has there been a theatrically released, major 2D animated Disney film that featured the modern era we live in, while also including more relatable themes of familial tension in that recognizable backdrop. Disney's previous films were often retellings of traditional stories, fairy tales, and legends involving magic, royalty, and the grand adventures of older characters. I think in that era, that particular approach was running a little stale and seemed a bit antiquated. Lilo and Stitch, in comparison, was part character-driven drama, not so much about an epic story, but about regular people facing real-world problems, exploring their place in society, and repairing their fractured bonds. Add to that a cutesy, non-human protagonist with a bold personality, some colorful and appealing scenery, and you have an obvious recipe for success with audiences. For this reason, it seems like filmgoers decided to not automatically hate the live-action remake like they did with Disney's past offerings. Given this contrast, Lilo and Stitch could even come off as edgy and progressive, and many more modern American animated films would follow in its footsteps, allowing many viewers to draw up theories that the film is about grief-driven depression, or even autism. Regardless, it is a grounded story about something that many identify with, the need to belong, and of course, the standard message of love conquering all. I think Disney failed to see that when they decided that the animation was the issue. CGI films like Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. did more than give us eye-catching graphics. They gave us fresh means of storytelling. I think Disney realized how unorthodox Lilo and Stitch was compared to their other releases, so they created their much-beloved advertising campaign juxtaposing Stitch's shenanigans with their famous classics. It's clear that they felt that Stitch, compared to our traditional protagonists, was unrestrained, untamed, perhaps downright bizarre, and practically wild. This is why I believe he is a perfect metaphorical representation of the experience of exotic pet ownership. The word exotic pet takes on different meanings depending on the context. For most, it is an unusual pet, and for many, that means an animal that is often considered inappropriate to keep as a pet due to its perceived wild, demanding, or difficult nature. This obviously applies to species like foxes, primates, and raccoons, but may even extend to more common animals like reptiles, birds, and sugar gliders. Many exotic pet owners may experience the initial shock from others over the unusualness of the pet they've chosen, against the general dog and cat expectations. And many characters throughout the film react to Lilo's choice of pet with shock or even disgust, which I'm sure many snake and reptile owners can identify with. Even the advertising for the film used this approach. Stitch is unusual, and therefore, he's threatening. Of course, Stitch is an alien creature who was created by Dr. Jumba Jookiba illegally. When the film opens, he is on trial for his crimes. And here's where I can draw up one of the best comparisons to exotic pet ownership. Stitch's presence is illegal, and he is exotic in every sense of the word, born in an alien environment, but not even really native to anywhere. He crash lands on Earth, an illegal animal, but he then comes to live with, ironically, a native Hawaiian. Now, it is very significant that Stitch happens to land in Hawaii, because it is by far the most restrictive state in the United States for pet ownership. You cannot own a hamster, and your dog and cat must be quarantined upon entry. In effect, what does Stitch need to disguise himself as? The most quintessential pet that is universally accepted in human society? A dog. Dogs are the pet that everyone seems to compare exotic pets to, in order to declare to others that they are horrible pets. Stitch himself appears to be an amalgamation of multiple different Earth-living species, other than something uniquely alien, many of which are kept as unique pets. Some say he's based off of a koala, but I think his ears remind me more of rodents like a chinchilla, and his nose is shaped like a spring hair. He's got the eyes and claws of a sugar glider and extra appendages like an insect. I feel like they just added this superfluous stuff because they designed Stitch to be cute, but wanted him to be alien-like at their convenience, because these features don't really seem to have a purpose other than that. But for our purposes, they symbolize animal diversity. the non-dog and cat pets. Chris Sanders, the film's creator, also co-directed How to Train Your Dragon, yet another film with a cute character based on traits from popular pets, the most notable being the axolotl. However, the dragon toothless has the characteristics and appearance of a melanistic wild cat. That movie is obviously inspired by people interacting with a somewhat challenging but misunderstood captive animal and creating a bond with them that is initially not understood and rejected by society. Same as with Lilo and Stitch. Both films feature characters that defy society's expectations. They can never be tame. They are too wild. They are wired to be aggressive and dangerous. The titular character, Lilo herself, is strikingly unusual for a little girl, and this is reflected in her choice of pet, where the two become reflections of each other. In fact, Lilo seems to have aggression and behavioral issues herself. Now, some have speculated that Lilo is meant to be autistic. Whatever your theory, she is also driven by her creativity and imagination, and possibly an internal conflict related to her unmitigated grief from the loss of her parents. She doesn't let societal expectations determine her pursuits, and adores what many find to be strange or even ugly. These traits lead her to choose Stitch as her pet at an animal shelter, who has bizarrely been left for dead in a cage with other living animals. Yeah. This movie is also loaded with absurdities, but Lilo loves Stitch because he is different, even if everyone around her doesn't get it. This, of course, resonates with alternative pet owners. Okay, so this might be a writing contrivance, but I couldn't help but notice that throughout the film, Jumba and the other alien characters often exaggerate the threat that Experiment 626 poses to others. I mean, we never see the high levels of destruction that Jumba is raving about, probably because, of course, Stitch is the hero of the movie. But in that way, I'm also reminded of what exotic pet owners go through. There are constant fears of exotic pets escaping, destroying the environment, and violently attacking random people, which rarely pan out. What's worse, this label is applied equally to all exotic pets when it may occur in a highly specific circumstance. For instance, squirrels get lumped into the same category as tigers. Once again, Stitch is being monitored and hunted down, persecuted in a similar way to some exotic pets. There is an overarching theme, of course, about family and no one getting left behind. There's a point in the movie where Lilo's sister, Nani, suggests returning Stitch because he's hard to handle, a sad reality for many pets. He's scratching the walls and has high energy levels like an unruly pet. But of course, she is prevented from doing so because of Lilo's objections. Now, this doesn't just apply to exotics, but really any challenging pet like certain dog and cat breeds. Much of Stitch's behavior can easily be interpreted as the inconvenient instincts that many animals express, and it's up to Lilo to find a way to work with them and keep him calm and happy.
There. You know, you wreck everything you touch. Why not try and make something for a change?
Stitch has strong instincts to perform the behaviors he's wired for, and he's being kept in an environment that isn't necessarily conducive for that, so he needs to find another outlet for his energy. There's a scene that shows Stitch getting overstimulated by the excited public, which is definitely something that happens with exotic pets that are taken out in crowded spaces, often irresponsibly. Of course, Stitch eventually learns to love living with his small broken family. This leads us to our ending, after a bunch of chaos and a standoff with the main antagonist, Captain Gantu, who is determined to capture the escaped experiment. When all is said and done, the conclusion is an important vindication for exotic pet owners. Lilo gets to keep Stitch. Now, in nearly every film I've seen involving a non-domestic, non-traditional pet, it tends to end with the typical message that the animal must be released into the wild because it's not meant to live with humans. But Lilo gets to keep her unusual creature. There's even a specific quote at the end that she says when Stitch is being taken from her.
3 days ago, I bought Stitch at the shelter. I paid $2 for him. See the snap? I own him. If you take him, you're stealing.
This is a simple yet very effective way to advocate for pet owners of all types, because this is essentially what is happening. For essentially no valid reason, animals are declared to be illegal and are stolen from their owners. There have even been cases where animals were obtained legally, but laws changed or were reinterpreted, and people were subjected to having their beloved pet confiscated. And it's making a significant statement here that even the leader of an intergalactic jurisdiction can understand this, but state officials cannot, thus giving Lilo and Stitch a perfect, perhaps unintended, pro-exotic pet ownership message.